Hello everyone, it's Courageous and I'm here with a new debt payment method. So if you saw my debt update video, you saw how I said I increased my credit score to 100 points in about a year. And I did it very quickly. And as the video goes along, I will insert screenshots of how my credit score progressed from when I got the report and then when I started paying off debt aggressively. And you'll see how it jumps as soon as I started doing this method. So who is this method for? First of all, this method is for someone who needs their credit score to go as high as possible right away. My goal was to buy a house and I needed to raise my credit score in order to get that house. So if you need good credit quickly, this method is for you. But let's first talk about the common debt payment methods that you see over and over again. And they are also great methods. I'm not knocking those methods at all, but I am praising my method because it worked for me, and I'll show you how. So the common debt payment strategies, 3 strategies. The first is the snowball method. So the snowball method is where you take your debts, you pay the smallest debt as fast as possible. So if your smallest debt is $500, you make the minimum payments. You never stop making the minimum payments, but you make the minimum payments on all other debts and pay the smallest one as fast as possible. Then when you're done paying that one, you put that amount that you used to put into that lowest debt into the next largest. So that way you gain momentum and you get confidence because, hey, I just cleared a debt. I'm on a roll, right? So that's the snowball method. The next one is the avalanche method. So if you're looking at a snowball is going downhill, getting bigger, whereas an avalanche starts big already, and then it gets smaller as it loses momentum at the bottom. So the avalanche method is where you pay the largest debt or the debt with the highest interest rate as fast as possible. So if the largest debt is $4,000, that's your focus. You're still making the minimum payments on the other debts, but you're focusing on putting any extra money that you can toward that largest debt or the debt with the highest interest rate. Then once you pay that one off, you start applying that amount to the next smallest debt. So that way you're clearing out so you're starting high, working yourself to the lowest amount in the avalanche, whereas in the snowball, you're starting small and working your way up towards the highest debt. This one, the goal is, and the benefits are that you pay off the big debt, and it also boosts your confidence. The next one is the debt consolidation method. This one is the hardest of the 3 because it requires some discipline. So here you take all of your debts, consolidate it into one debt, ideally with a lower interest rate. And you must avoid accruing new debt, right? So that way you only have one payment. You don't have to focus on this payment to this one, this day, all these other minimum payments. You have one minimum payment to focus on and decreasing your debt. So what is my method? Well, I'm going to tell you. I call it the statement method. And the statement method is how I got my credit score from this to this. And as you can see on this one, my credit score, this was before I moved to Rhode Island, right before I started my new job. I needed to move. I wanted to buy a house. They're like, slow your roll. Your credit ain't where it needs to be. And you need to have, at least a year at your job. So I was like, okay, so that gives me time because I needed to make a year at my job. So this is where I started, right? And when I moved here in August, and I didn't start getting paid for my job until September. So I had, I didn't have any money to pay. I was just making the minimum payments on my debt because I was on unemployment until I started getting paid for my job. So in September, I started my channel at the end of September. And I started paying off debt, and I was just, okay, well, let me just, pay off. I was just paying willy-nilly without a strategy, but I'm a strategy person. I needed to come up, I'm like, okay, if I need to raise my credit, and I need to get it as high as possible so that I get a great interest rate, and I'm in position to buy a house by the time I have a year at my job. I need to come up with a plan. So I came up with this plan. I would pay more. I would put extra payment, right, extra money toward the debt whose statement date was closing, as like the closest to when I got paid. So what that means is I was still in my budget because I was already doing the cash budgeting method, right? I still budgeted for my minimum payments on everything, but I made sure that I was paying off debt aggressively and applying extra money to the debt whose statement was closing the soonest. The reason being is you have your fixed pay date for each debt every month. When the statement closes, that's when they report to the credit bureaus. So if that debt if you're doing the snowball method, you're paying the smallest debt. If that statement closed, right? It's $500. If it closed on the 1st and it's the 5th, and you pay that debt, extra money towards that debt, that's not going to report to your credit report until the 1st of the next month, right? If you're paying the largest debt first, during using the avalanche method, if you're paying it and the date of the closing, again, it's same thing, same strategy. If the date of statement closing already passed, that's not going to apply to your credit until the next month. Whereas the one that comes the next, so if I get paid on the 14th and the next credit card, I don't care which one it is closing in 2 days, I'm making the extra payment towards that one, because that's a bump to my credit immediately, because I know I'm going to get a bump. As long as your balances are decreasing, especially if you're paying off or you're making a large payment, right? Even if you're just making the minimum payment, but obviously the more you pay, the more, especially if you pay off, the more your credit increases. So if I pay off a card that's closing now, or I pay off a large chunk of that, my credit score immediately jumps. And then the next month when I do it, my score jumps some more. The only way that score is going to decrease is if my balances increase, right? So my balances will not increase because I'm still making the minimum payment on each of my debts, right? And by minimum payment, I also mean the debt that I'm paying. So say the statement, because the statement and the due date are not the same. Your due date is usually like 4 to 5 days before your statement closing date. So I already budgeted for that minimum payment. So I'm still making that minimum payment, right? And then when I get paid, right, if it's not at the same day, if it's not before the due date, if I get paid on the 15th, and the due date was the 14th, right? I still needed to make that minimum payment because you don't want to be late. So, but I already budgeted for that with my previous paycheck. So I'm making that extra payment before the statement day closes. And the benefit of that is I'm getting a monthly jump in my credit score immediately, not waiting for the next month, because that's delaying a whole month. If I'm paying that one that was already closed, that statement closed already, I have to wait a whole month for that jump. Whereas I get a bump 2 days after my paycheck, right? So the benefit is, and the goal is, it boosts your credit score quickly, and it boosts your confidence and buying power, right? So the other ones boost your confidence, but this one boosts your buying power. And that's important if you're trying to buy something that you're going to finance, a house, a car, furniture, or anything, right? That requires, even if you need to rent an apartment, your lease is almost coming up. You have to, the place you're going to, you're looking to rent is checking credit scores. That's, you want to get that as high as possible, right? So this is the benefit to my method. So now let's see what that looks like in real numbers. So we have debt number 1, debt number 2, and debt number 3. So 500, 4,000, 2,000, and 1,500. The minimum payments are here because remember, you're still budgeting for the minimum payments. No matter what, you need to make those payments because we do not need your credit to take a hit, right? But let's look at the statement closing dates. So the statements close, so the minimum payments you're going to make on their due date or by their due date. You budgeted for that, so you can make those on time. And the statement closing dates are where you're trying to make the extra payment by. So if we look at the debt snowball method, we're going to pay off debt number 1 first, right? Because we start with the smallest balance and pay that off as quickly as possible. But let's say we get paid. Let me continue. So if we're doing the debt snowball method, we're going to start on debt number 1, no matter what, because we're trying to pay the smallest debt first. And then we'll move to the next one and then the next one until we get to this one. If we're doing the avalanche method, we're going to pay debt number 2 first because we're paying off the largest debt, then moving to the next largest, and then the next, and then the next, right? The debt consolidation method, we'll only combine this all into one. But remember, no more debt, no new debt, right? With my method, the statement method, I'm going to put it right here in quotations. The statement method, we're going to pay the debt closest to the statement closing when you get paid. So if you get paid on the 14th, right, the statement closes for debt number 3. Debt number 3 is neither the lowest nor the highest, but it's the closest to our pay date. So we're going to pay any extra money we can to this one because guess what? On the 15th, the statement closes. The 16th, they're reporting to your credit bureaus. So on the 16th, your credit score is going to jump up because you made an extra payment towards that one. Now, next month or the next paycheck, right? So if you get paid weekly, then your next paycheck would pay an extra payment towards debt number 4. If you get paid bi-weekly, then the next one, right? Because the 15th would be the 30th or the 31st. Your next extra payment would be to debt number 1 because that's the nearest statement closing date. So it is possible, let's say if you do get paid on the 30th, right? And you have, obviously this is counting on you having any extra money left over to apply to debt, right? Each paycheck or any paycheck. This is any paycheck. I'm not saying this doesn't have to be each time because obviously you need money for everything else. You're not going to, overwhelm your pockets or take away from your necessities to do this method, but it's counting on you having any extra money to put towards debt after expenses and bills, right? So if I pay extra towards this, so by extra I mean I could pay it off, or I could just pay a large chunk, right? Other than the minimum payment, that is going to. And by large, I mean just more than the minimum payment because it's going to decrease. By the next time I got paid, I will focus on this one. So this one, we're still making the minimum payment, but I don't get paid again because I'm on a bi-weekly schedule. So the next goal would be debt number 1. I don't get paid again. I budgeted for this one. I'm still making the minimum payment, but I will go back to debt number 2, right? So we're doing this as each time as close to the closing date as possible so that we can go paying off debt and go boosting your credit score, right? So I started when they pulled my credit, before I moved to Rhode Island, they pulled my credit. I was at 617. That was in June of 2021. That's the one that's here. Editing just put it in my hand right here, right? I got approved for my mortgage on August 4th. That is the credit score you see here. That is the one that showed up in my credit score. And as you can see, that's a 100-point difference. And I'll just put how it was jumping when I started this method. I started the cash budgeting method at the end of September, but I didn't catch on to this method until I think maybe November or December when I started like really thinking, no, it wasn't November. Was it December? I don't know. I'll look exactly when if I can remember, but I'm still going to put screenshots of how my credit score was progressing. I think the first month my credit score only jumped like like a month, like a few points, but it was incrementally increasing. Obviously, if I accrued new debt, which sometimes happened, I'm not gonna lie, I probably could have made it jump quicker, but I did maintain, because what I did, I had a credit card that I paid off, and if I needed to use a credit card, I would use that one and I would pay it off before the statement closed, because if it closed at zero and it recloses at zero, right? The transaction never happened. It was just like money I borrowed and paid, like I just borrowed from future me, right? Because I never let that balance close on a positive, so that my credit score wouldn't decrease again. Because if it closed at zero and the next month it closes on a balance, that decreases your credit score, right? The goal in all of these methods is do not accrue more debt. If you want to use your credit card, if you want to get the points, because you still get points as long as you pay it off, right? You get points for the transaction. So I was getting points, but I was not getting a balance, right? So that is the goal with these methods, all of them, no matter which one you choose. But I recommend my statement method because it is a quick way to boost your credit score, especially if you have some purchase that you need to procure financing for. So let me know in the comments what you think of this method, if you're thinking of trying it, or which of these methods you prefer. If you haven't yet, please subscribe, hit that like button, and I'll see you in my next video. This is Courageous. Stay brave.